Welcome at Private Kitchen. Today we have a session on AI in music, and I would like to introduce you to the participants in this discussion. First of all, we have Janne Spijkervet. Janne is a composer, but also a researcher at TikTok in London. Welcome, Janne. And then we have Tan van Nispen. Tan van Nispen is a senior lecturer, but also a researcher and an expert on AI at HKU Music and Technology. And then the third person is one of my colleagues at Private Kitchen, Ivo Witteveen. Ivo is almost also everything, a composer, a lecturer, and one of the editors at Private Kitchen. And I'm Rens Machielse, a composer and also editor at Private Kitchen. We have a short session today, but we will do it more in the future because developments are going that quick in AI, and particularly in our perspective, AI and music. So I would like to kick off with a question to Janne, because Janne, you sent us an email a couple of months ago in which you told us that a lot of development is going on, and after that, of course, ChatGPT came out and MusiekInstituut. Can you share your thoughts with us about this kind of developments and about the possibilities that they will offer, but also the dangers they might offer to composers of music?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much again for the invite. Really glad to be here. Yeah, I sent you an email. I think it was like just before Christmas. I was in a cafe in New York, and I was just overthinking what had happened at the conference I was attending. We have about 3 or 4 big conferences in AI every year, where all researchers come together and share their new findings, sometimes also new products, because research goes into products pretty quickly these days. And I was just a little bit overwhelmed, actually quite overwhelmed by also the capabilities of these AI models in the creative space. Especially, of course, you mentioned ChatGPT, of course, in the language domain, like how powerful these models have already become. And of course, there's you can sort of look into make a prediction about the future, like, okay, when do these models actually make or start making an impact in our daily lives? That is, of course, already happening with a lot of things in recommendation, of course, at Spotify, especially in the music industry. But, for actually a creative application or to have it sit at the level of in a creative workspace, I myself and others also predicted that to be maybe in the next 5 years, that's still or maybe even 10 years. It's still quite far away. But then at the conference, some papers were already announced that we're actually quite getting there already in terms of, that the quality was, what it should have been maybe in 3 or 4 years from now. So some alarm bells started ringing a little bit. But maybe we should have a little bit of a think about how these models, now that they're being developed already, will impact our creative lives daily in also positive ways. So I think there's a lot of beauty to be found in these new developments, just like we had years and years ago with synthesizers or with microphones when they were developed so many years ago. But also, also talk about the impact of them in also possibly negative ways. So yeah, that's how I actually, I think sent you guys an email, maybe to start thinking about it. So I'm very, very glad to be here to shed a little bit of light on what the progress is right now in AI.
Any questions? Ivo, we had some questions prepared.
Yes, I listened to the music that's generated by the MusiekInstituut model by Google Research. Mm-hmm. And I would say that it sounds intriguing. You could say it sounds very good for generated music, but you could just as easy say that it sounds really bad if you compare it to human-made music. And to me, it sounds a bit like an amalgam of multiple pieces of music sort of playing at the same time and then somewhat morphed and quantized to sort of fit together, maybe without a real understanding of what elements would actually fit together. And that made me think, I'm no expert on AI, so I'm just talking as a composer and music producer here. I was assuming that this might be because the AI is trained by listening to full mixes of music. And my question is that true? Would that be a limitation of AI? Or is AI also able to sort of demix multiple tracks and analyze elements of music like a trained musician would do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. I think this is kind of the age. I think the 2020s is the age of we've had very specialized model developments in the past, I think 10 years. So if you talk about sort of unmixing music, because you're absolutely correct that MusiekILM in this case was in fact trained on full mixes of audio, but there are models and very good models as well that can actually separate the sources of a full mix. And we see that these models are becoming better and better as well. I think, scrolling through like or TikTok or Insta pages of DJs, you see them sometimes use like vocal separators. So you basically just take the vocal out of the mix and you just get like a clean stem like that. All of that is nowadays AI. But there are also models that can separate multiple sources. So you have the vocals, the drums, the guitars, the piano, etc. So there are very specialized models right now that do these tasks. But in the case of MusiekILM, this is sort of a model that's just trained on sort of everything. So it's not very specialized. So it has, I would almost say, I think we overestimate the capability of such a model in terms of understanding what music means, because it's been really generalized about, here's a full mix, and here's a text description of this full mix, and now make music. Well, that's not how you would ask, of course, a human being to maybe compose music or understand music at all. But we asked that model to do so, and this is what it came up with. And I think that's also one of the reasons that the sounds in these AI models, at least in MusiekILM, right now sounds very like mushy, a bit like put together. Like you say, like it sounds a bit quantized, like it has some feeling for rhythm, but not really. And it tends to mix together like different tracks all at once. And that's really because it's kind of generating like a summary of what it knows about whatever you put in. Like, okay, give me like an R&B track. Well, it will probably take some average of the R&B tracks that it has learned so far. Okay. But in a sort of new way, because it's always like recombining the existing things that it heard before. So you could argue, well, it sounds like it, but it really isn't like it. But is that new, like fundamentally new, or not? But that's really the limit of this model right now.
How far are we away from, for instance, saying, okay, AI tool, could you please listen to all Paul McCartney bass lines from 1968 to 1969, and now suggest a new bass line for my new song? Is that already possible? Is that in 5 years, or will it never happen?
No, that will happen. I think that's an excellent PhD topic for some researcher to start out with right now, because I think the AI toolboxes that we have right now would already facilitate a lot in that kind of research already. Like in music information retrieval research, things like there was already like a research that transcribed basically the entire Beatles catalog, like the structure, the lyrics, the composition, the bass lines even. So they're available in the symbolic domain in notes, basically. So you could already like start, I guess, your PhD on that topic and generate new Paul McCartney bass lines. But now we can also do that with audio. I think that would require maybe a few years for a PhD student to do that. Yeah, like that close we are to answering those questions.
I'm also curious about, because you were a bit frightened in your email about possible dangers for composers. What do you see as possible dangers for composers, and do you also see a way you can protect yourself as a composer to those possible dangers? Can you say something about that?
Yeah, I think right now as a composer you can look at it maybe at different ways. Like it's not all doom, but I think it would be good to calculate in maybe also in the example of ChatGPT. Like I guess we have a nice warning from that system with like also Microsoft developing Bing right now. Like how does that change our creative lives as a copywriter? So how does a model like MusiekILM change your life as a composer? I think you could think in a way that, like right now, like I described to Ivo, it's a little bit like it creates like a mushy like summary of what it thinks is R&B music or dance or maybe even like orchestral music. But I think what ChatGPT or the models like that showed us is that once you put a human feedback in that loop inside, that AI model, and you kind of start to guide that system in a meaningful way that is both meaningful for us as a human, but also meaningful for an AI model like that, then it starts to become quite powerful. And once you have that kind of steerability of such a huge beast that is that AI model, then it can become quite steerable also by people that maybe don't know how to write orchestral or dance music or something else, like, for example, a TV producer, or someone that's maybe doing local advertisement, like these immediate things. And I think that's a very beautiful thing, that people suddenly can make music in a way that is meaningful for them, but also on a level that maybe doesn't require a lot of schooling in that sense. It will basically lower the barrier, I think, of entry into some things. Like, okay, how does that impact my life as a composer? When maybe my client is suddenly able to generate, a 33-second track to this commercial with this particular sound, like with a text description. So I think it's good to start thinking about these things. But I think also in a way that you could protect yourself, or maybe start to think, okay, how do I how do these models even know about this music, is because they are trained on a lot of music data, of course. And I think when you enter, for example, a sync deal with a library or something like that, maybe even like library music companies might be starting AI in the future to start, tailor their songs with AI to their clients. So suddenly you have like an AI middleman that remixes your song into something that actually fits like multiple things, like multiple advertisements. Like, these things sound futuristic, but there are companies working on this technology. And I think it's important to think about, okay, when I submit my track to this library, maybe I can include a license that I won't allow an AI to remix my track, or I won't allow an AI to actually train on the music I've written. And in that way, you could protect yourself from, of course, appearing in a data set that you might not want your music to be in. So I think that's a very powerful and a very simple legal mechanism to prevent that from happening. And it also maybe gives you some time to adjust to maybe a new period that's coming in maybe 5 or 10 years for commercial music writing. Maybe that's like a first simple thing, because to be honest, the law hasn't caught up yet with AI and copyright. So we're still in a gray area that also some companies will gladly take an opportunity in to grow. So it's important to maybe like take very simple like legal clauses when you submit your music to a label or something else, just to prevent an AI to learn from like a future genre. Because I also think that humans can innovate still a lot, and that's our power right now. Yeah.
I was also curious, Tom, AI, has it an existence among students? Are they aware of it? How are they looking upon it? Because they're the composers of the future. Do you notice any knowledge, or do they realize what's coming up? How do you deal with it as a lecturer, for example?
Yeah, well, excellent question. So in regard to students, at HKU, Utrecht University of the Arts, of course, we have like many art disciplines. So from graphic design to theater, etc. So I'm mainly lecturing at music and technology. So two things, like one, students in general. We now had the third time that we did a HKU-wide seminar on artificial intelligence. It was called RT Intelligence, so RT from artsy fartsy, and then intelligence. So this was the third edition. The last two editions, there were quite a lot of students that were really shocked on understanding what AI was capable of. So this was like last year. This year, of course, Stable Diffusion and ChatGPT were quite well known, and I think there was only one that hadn't got up with this thing called ChatGPT. So on a user level, many students know kind of what AI is capable of, but then there's no understanding of like how were these models trained, what is AI, what's this thing called deep learning, if they've ever heard of that. So to my idea, more in general, AI on a user level is getting more accessed on all fields, but then on a slightly higher level, so scripting or maybe even developer level, in our department, the music and technology, there's every year only a couple of students that are fascinated by what they can do themselves with it. So train their own models or continue developing on the source code that is being shared. And a couple of them then also continue a path in artificial intelligence. And well, of course, Janne is also one of the first students that was embracing AI in the music process in the graduation, and also continued on this path of AI in context of music. Yeah. So long story short, on user level, yes, there is some understanding. But when I, for instance, introduce the first year students, and also we have a preparatory class before first year, then they're all not aware of what's happening in this music and sound field. And then I also recognize the shock that comes with this news.
Is it also your experience, Ivo, at Groningen?
At our conservatory, there's not as much music technology as at HKU. So students we have are typically composers, music producers. But I know some of them are very interested in AI and ask me questions about it, and said to them, wait a few weeks. I'm having a really interesting interview really soon, and I'll share with you as soon as I know more.
Is there anything to say about, you just mentioned already, Janne, that the law is behind, as usual, you might say. How do you look at the future for author rights? Is AI, an algorithmic program, is going to be recognized as being an author of new work? What's your view on that? Can you say something about that?
That's a difficult one. I'm not like in legal things at all. I just know in Luxembourg, for example, I think there was the first AI composer, Eva, that was recognized as a legal author. But that was an exception, I think. I don't think that happens more times. So I think the way that's structured right now, I mean, there's companies out there, right, that provide AI generated music for like in a royalty-free manner for YouTube or TikTok. I think companies that previously existed, like JukeTech, which was acquired by TikTok, that's my team right now, did this, but also companies right now like Moobert, I think right now operate under the legal entity of a company. So I think the copyrights of the product they're distributing is basically reformulated so that it falls under the copyrights of a company. That's the way it's solved right now, and you could argue that's also in the future that will happen. I think, to be honest, I think there will be a wave, of course, that we see within the copyright domain of authors, that there's a wave of protests, of course. It's just simply not fair if these models are trained on human work, and the compensation isn't there, for works that are reproduced essentially by AI. You could still argue it's still a reproduction of things that it has seen in a data set, and the copyright that lives in that reproduction maybe should be still with the original database, first of all, authors, but also the people that contributed to the database. So yeah, my view on it is that it won't be recognized for a while, an AI as a legal author. Because there's still many issues to be solved to fix the copyright issues that are already there in database rights, basically.
Perhaps the other way around would be easier. People generating AI-assisted compositions, maybe redacting it a bit and then registering it as their own composition.
That's going to be an interesting one, because do you then say, okay, I co-authored this piece with Mozart GPT or whatever, is that going to be something that will be registered at Buma Stemra in a few years? Funnily enough, we already see papers, academic papers, co-authored by ChatGPT. You don't only see the actual paper, but you also see it as an author to some academic papers, and some are actually quite serious about it, that it adds something to their writing. So I think you're right. I think that's that is something that we might even see first, if people even admit to it, of course, because We might also just, say, well, it's just another tool. I'm not going to mention Cubase in my copyright, right? Like I'm not going to do that. That's silly. But in what way does Cubase or Ableton contribute to your creative writing? Once there is like a generative component or a VST plugin that provides that. Yeah.
Would maybe also depend on the end user license for the software that you use. If you use like the generative tool of the future, Cubase, can you claim it as your own work, or do you have to share credit, or will there be like a free Cubase based on the assumption that you share credit? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Like these are all super fundamental questions to copyright, and that's all unsolved and all like unexplored right now.
Ton and Janne both. A final question: do you see any developments on short notice that will be brought out in a couple of months, or is it still unsure?
Maybe Janne is more ahead of like what's the upcoming papers to be expected.
MusiekInstituut addressed, and it's sort of like showing some muscle, right, by Google, because they're like, okay, yeah, but now we can generate 5 minutes of music. Boom, it's we solve music. And there we go, nice one, Google. But I think it's just like a little premise to get people, of course, researchers excited to work on that domain. There will be some exciting papers, I think, specialized models that can, in a really well way, for example, generate like little loops or sound effects. Like these papers are definitely coming up in 2023. If I would look in the glass, how do you say that? Prediction ball, then a fast ball. Then I think we will have a model that can generate pretty good, like high quality sound effects using text descriptors. So that will be, of course, very interesting, like that kind of interface to sound designers. A very simple like text interface, and you get back a sound that hopefully reflects the text that you put in. So I think that will be there at studio level quality. Like there's these models already, but at 16 kilohertz, so it's not maybe not that usable. But we'll see that definitely in the generative domain. Maybe also for music loops, we will have that as well, like short, like 5 or maybe 10-second loops that are actually musically coherent, that aren't like maybe a summary or like some mushy thing that maybe MusiekInstituut now produces, but it actually sounds like something that might be usable in your music. So that will be also super exciting, because also as a producer, like, my up and down arrow key of my laptop are always broken, because, you always scroll through your loops. Yeah. But now there will be a new way to generate samples and loops in that way. So I'm really excited about those things and what they can mean, for my creative production skills. Yeah.
Final question.
Is there a role for, you talked a bit, Janne, about individual composers, what they can do. Is there a role for like branch organizations or copyright organizations? Who should take action right now?
I think it's good to just, of course, like ordered, and I'm very happy that the language model sort of came first. So I was very curious to hear maybe even what the writers associations think about ChatGPT, and maybe even start talking to them, like, okay, what is happening in your association? Like, how do you prepare for this? Like, if you know someone in your network that is a writer, like, talk about it. Like, okay, what steps are you taking? Because in that way, we're kind of maybe like second in the queue of addressing this. But we're all together in this. And I think in the end, we should all really like make ourselves aware, and slowly also start asking maybe harder questions. I think the authors, rightfully so, they already have a lawsuit against like Stability AI, for example. Maybe it might not be that far, but I think we could already talk about maybe even like some preventive measures. Like, okay, maybe you can just, as an association, we can maybe create an example clause that prevents, or says, don't use my music in AI training data sets. Like, something like that. Because I'm not legally proficient to write that down. Like I could maybe write 2 sentences, but maybe I don't know if that covers the current legal implications of that. So maybe like little things like these also to inform your members, like, okay, well, this is happening. We see that companies use music as their training data. Here is something that, if you want, could prevent you from being included in there. So I think little steps like these could already, of course, bring awareness, but also be like a bit defensive against something that is still like a gray area. So these things will develop over time. So I think raising awareness right now is one of the most important things.
Thanks. And any final question from somebody? Okay.
I have one addition, like on this future aspects, because we talked a lot about music now, and also kind of the sound libraries, etc. This one domain which is also monetary interesting is the field, for instance, of the voice actors, audio books being written out, and there's great advancements in technology of text to speech, for instance. And recently there was also, and I'll share the link in the chat, but there's like this group of people now also starting lawsuits against, for instance, Spotify for their voice in audiobooks being used in the data set for these text-to-speech models. And so changing the rules and or agreements while in the game, or for instance, having Spotify as your platform of distribution is, it can be frowned upon. Similar to the stability AI for the stable diffusion, there's some other legal challenges at the moment, but also platforms that are already out there. So these text-to-speech tools are already being implemented.
Yeah, like Apple, I think 2 weeks ago announced that every book in their bookstore is now able to be heard by AI-generated voices. So yeah, you could ask yourself, okay, as a voice actor, what's going to happen? So yeah, super relevant as well. And exactly like you said, these legal things change also over time. I think even at TikTok, we had because we have some TikTok voices in the app that translates, what the user writes on screen to audio. And the legal agreement wasn't completely covered. So the voice had to be removed because the original voice actor didn't like it anymore, the agreement they ended up initially. So actually people were really mad that the very recognizable voice from TikTok was gone suddenly. Like we had to have a new text-to-speech, So that was also interesting that people were also very sad that, their very familiar female speaker was suddenly gone. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, everybody, for this informative, very informative insight in AI. And I hope to be back in a couple of months with all of you to see what's happened then. And because it's going so fast, so we definitely will be back with another session. Thanks for now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.